And thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express on a night when we still have some students who are stranded across the country because they showed up in school as directed by the Ghana Education Service, only to find out that schools will not be reopening as has earlier been communicated. Fundamentally, it has raised questions of the free SHS and the question of congestion, which really has been used as an explanation for why the reopening date had to be postponed. And we've heard from Charles making the call earlier, as way back as March, that this is going to be an issue. So the key question then is, why didn't the authorities act earlier to inform parents on this? But there's a bigger question there that we need to look at in terms of where we are with the free SHS and how do you address the question of space and obviously the congestion issues that we're beginning to see. We are learning about the difficulties that we've seen, and that the rescheduling of the date itself has become an issue. And so the ordinarily, Form 3 students were to have returned to school on April 7th. But as we've seen here, the reopening of schools for the 3rd senior high school students has been now rescheduled to May 5th. And so if you're a parent tonight, this is good information for you. Just make a note of this so you don't forget it, because the new date for reopening is now May 5th. Keep that in mind as we get through this and speak to the authorities for you. Now, the current arrangement means that the Form 3 students will be in school from May 5th till the WASI period. And so they're going to be in school throughout. And this was the initial calendar that was proposed. I'm sure parents are pretty familiar with this. This obviously is no more because of the changes that we've seen across board. And so obviously the first and second years will still be in school, and they would go on ahead with the calendar as we've seen. Now, we've seen the double track system brought in as a way of dealing with the fundamental issue of the rising numbers of enrollment and students coming in. It was one of those that was introduced as a stopgap measure. Government rolled back on it as a result of confidence that a lot of investment had been done in infrastructure. Now, the situation meant that schools had to run a shift system in order to deal with the high numbers. Now, talking about high numbers, this is our graph here, just to give you a pictorial understanding of what has happened with enrollment numbers over the years since the introduction of free SHS in 2017. As you can see, this graph here shows you the constant upward trajectory that the enrollment and numbers had been. When the government started this policy, we are just about 353,000 students. And then this, in the second academic year, in 2008-2019, this shoots up to 794,000 students. Now, we are talking about just this last academic year, which is now expired and the new one is about to begin, 2019-2020. Look at this jump, 1.2 million students. This is pretty unprecedented in terms of the sheer number of students in all three streams, Form 1, Form 2, and Form 3. 1.2, so huge numbers, right? It brings up the question, how do you accommodate all the numbers, as we've been demonstrating here, right? Which is really at the heart of the postponement. We're hearing from the minority side. Remember that they had a different approach to dealing with this particular issue, which is progressive, right? So Dr. Park, who is the deputy ranking on the Parliament's Education Committee, has written an article. In fact, they issued a statement yesterday, and they note what the NDC has started to do, constructing 200 E-blocks, senior high schools across the country, because they knew we had to get to a point where infrastructure will become an issue. He says by December 2016, a number of the school projects were ongoing and in over 400 senior high schools across the country. So what happened to them? We know that this government continued to build some of them, but some of them are also still being left uncompleted. Currently, he claims dormitory space is pretty congested right now. In fact, Charles has made that point also. Some of the dormitories are done, but furniture has become an issue. How do you furnish it for the students has become a key issue. In many schools, the bunk beds, and these are the beds that have double-decker and several rows upwards, again are available, but in very close, tight-knit spaces for students. But if you track also the government's investment, government had done some significant investment in expanding infrastructure generally in education. And we've seen that they have invested in a total of 1,119, right? And this is infrastructure projects initiated senior high schools since then. That is what they've initiated. But in terms of what they've completed, this is 539, right? This is quite a lot if you consider the investments that have been done by government over the last, 4 years. But again, if you go back to the graph I showed you, this is 1.2 million. And so no matter how much of the investments you put in, no matter the investment that we've seen in building infrastructure, it's still proving a difficulty. Actually, we're learning this week that even when you have the buildings, you will still need to furnish them, as Charles has said. And so let me bring in my guests who are joining us as we begin to look at the problem that has forced the Ghana Education Service to postpone the reopening date. Joining me is Dr. Clement Park himself, who is the Deputy Ranking on the Education Committee, Mr. Kofi Asare, who obviously the Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch. We also have Cassandra Chuma-Mpofo, who is the head PR unit at the Ghana Education Service, who's also joining us tonight. She has, of course, been speaking on this in the last 2 days, obviously, because parents need to hear that schools have been postponed. So if you're sending your child, you can keep the child home. And I'm delighted to say that we have a parent, Gertrude Tennyson Razak, who is joining us tonight on Zoom. And I want to start with Madam Gertrude Razak, because it's really about the children. And thank you very much for joining us all on Zoom. Gertrude, let me start with you. Your child is in senior high school, Form 3, correct?
Yes, please.
Is it in Accra or outside Accra?
It's in the central region.
In the central region. But you are in Accra, correct? Okay. So what happened what happened? Did you send your child to school on the date that was announced?
So we were at the school gates when the security man told us that reopening has been postponed to 5th May. And, because of the traffic on the Cape Coast Road, we left home around 5 a.m. So by 7:45, we were already in Cape Coast. And when we got to the gate and we were about entering the school, we were told we cannot enter because the reopening has been postponed. And I was a bit surprised because we didn't know anything about that. So we decided to go to the school administration to really confirm that. And when we got there, we were told by the assistant headmaster that truly they were supposed to come back to school on the 5th May. And I was disappointed because I didn't understand why I should be told on the day of reopening. So that was how frustrating and really irritating it was.
So you had to now send your ward back to Accra, correct, from Central Region?
Yes, we had to.
How did your ward take this? Because she was very excited about going back to school.
Yes, and she was a bit disappointed because she said they had a lot to catch up on. So she was looking forward to go to school to finish the syllabus and start revision. But because we didn't have anything to do, we have to just come back and arrange for private classes to be done at home for her.
Okay, so now this is an additional investment that you've been forced to do.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's going to cost you a fortune.
It is.
Yeah. Let me bring in Cassandra Chum with the Ghana Education Service, because obviously they have been issuing a statement on this. Cassandra, what do you say to the parent you had there?
Evans, I just want to, say that we at Ghana Education Service, I want to render an unqualified apology to the parents and the students, our key stakeholders, the teachers, and then the general public for communicating to them late. We acknowledge the shortfall on our part, and we are deeply sorry. We know that hoping going forward, this won't happen again. And we have put measures in place to ensure that when they go back to school on the 5th, academic will progress so well that they will be adequately prepared for the final examination.
Okay. Gertrude, what do you make of the apology you just heard from the Ghana Education Service?
It's late, but what can we do? You can't fight the government. We can only hope for the best going forward.
Okay,
because
so
for me it was extremely unfortunate. But what can we do?
So apology accepted.
It is.
Okay, great. There's an assurance from the GS that they're going to put in place measures so they catch up. You know, you say your child was worried about making up ground. The assurance is that a lot is going to be put in place right now to make sure that that gap is bridged when they come back on the 5th.
For me, that's a worry, because in the past we've had Ghana Education Service give us that promise, and it's never, materialized, because they will tell you they will make it up, but they don't. You know, so the exams is drawing nearer, and there's so much to be done, and you are being told it will be done. But the thing is, who in the Ghana Education Service monitors to ensure that it's done?
Cassandra, that's a direct parent feedback to you. That there's been a promise in the past, but she and her child, they don't see that.
Well, I do not know what exactly she's talking about in the past, but what I can say in the future, going forward with regards to her son or daughter especially, is that, you know, if they had gone yesterday, they would have vacated on the 28th of May and then had their vacation 29th May to 29th June. So it was like a 1-month vacation period. And that's what we have shifted, forward. So that period will not be lost at all. That period will not be lost. When they come, you know, on the 5th of May, they will be in school till the last person completes the last paper in October. So, madam, be rest assured that we will make up. No, there's not going to be any break. We'll cover all the topics or the strands, everything that we need to cover, and give them ample time to also read over their notes. And then just like I've been saying, you know, before they write any major examination, there should be a number of hours that they have to spend to be able to prepare. That's why I could say that they have actually spent this number of hours and they are ready to write the exams. In our case, we are expected to complete 1,080 hours, and per our calculation and what we have done in the new academic calendar, which I have here, they are going to have that same calendar. There's not going to be any break. And so when they go back to school, we will be able to cover all the lessons left, and then they will be prepared enough to write their exams. And so we will deliver on our promise.
I'll get Gertrude's reaction to that quickly. But Cassandra, tell me, what was the real reason why we had to postpone the reopening date? Charles has told us yesterday that key reason why they communicated the need to reschedule the reopening date was because of fear of congestion if the third years were allowed in school. Was that the real reason?
Well, that was part of the concerns that they raised. And then the other part was that we also wanted to ensure that the Form 3s would not have an uninterrupted classes or instructional hours when they go back to school. You know, if they had gone yesterday again, there would have been a break, but we wanted to continue. And so that is the reason why. But again, Evans, I keep saying that regardless of the reasons that we put forward, we admit that we have no justification to have communicated the decision to them late. And so I personally do not want to talk about because of this and that, that we had to postpone. Whatever decision it was, whatever reason, whether good or whatever, we should have informed the parents, just like our parent here who got to Cape Coast before she had the message. That was unfortunate, and that is why we are apologizing.
Yeah. Let's look at the bigger picture now. I want to bring in Kofi Asare because Kofi, beyond the challenges with the, sudden rescheduling of the day, the main problem, the fundamental problem, as we've learned from Charles, is congestion, they've said, and which is a byproduct of, obviously, the free SHS. As I illustrated, we are talking about 1 million plus students, right? What's your reaction to that admission by Charles and the GES that we are now having congestion, and which is now forcing the hands of the education authorities to act in the way they've acted?
Well, at the Charles level, good evening to your cherished audience and my co-panelists. At the Charles level, I must admit that it is a truism that there is few infrastructure available, especially furniture, in the sense that most of the construction projects are still at various stages of completion. And even when they are completed, they have not yet been furnished. And so at the Charles level, yes, that is a fact. But you see, Charles is only telling us what should have manifested by way of data at the management level. And this is where we see the challenge. We see a gap between the GES, the Free Senior High School Secretariat, and the Computerized School Placement Secretariat. Now, this is how the system is supposed to work. The Computerized School Placement Secretariat is the one that receives credible data. Supposedly credible data about vacancies in schools and placements that they have made. It is only that secretariat that can tell you that we received 1,000 vacancies in Presec, and we have deployed 1,000. Out of it, 800 are boarders. And these vacancies are normally based on the number of beds and then the number of desks in the classrooms. And so, if you cast your mind back, on 3rd January, His Excellency the President announced that double track was ending for 2 streams, the Form 3s and then the Form 1s. And he mentioned that the Form 2s will keep doing the double track. Then, on the 4th of February, the CSSPS coordinator, Mr. Sasu, held a press conference or made a pronouncement in the media and indicated that the plan is that there are 500,000 vacancies for Form 1 students alone. And that the plan of government is Form 2s, both tracks, and Form 3, 1 track, will be in school first. And when they are done, then the Form 1 students will be in school alone. That was what was announced by the CSSPS on the 4th of February, which meant that prior to the placement and prior to the transition, the plan was that Form 2, both tracks, and then Form 3 will be in school at one time. And then when they leave the school, the Form 1 students, as we currently have in both tracks, would go to school alone. And so with this information available to the public, it was obvious that the capacity of our schools was the capacity that would contain 800,000 out of the 1.2 million. Because averagely, we have 400,000 in Form 3, about 410,000 in Form 2, and about 430,000 in Form 1 now. And so averagely, it meant that our schools could accommodate 800,000 at a point. So immediately the GAS announced that, yes, we are going back to double track for Form 1 students, but then track A and track B, or track green and gold, are going to report on the same dates. It meant that we had about 850,000 students on campus. There was no way another 400,000, which is Form 3 students, could return and add to the number without any intervention, i.e. expansion in capacity between the dates the CSSPS announced the vacancy and then now. And so this was obviously as a result of, I believe, a mix-up between the data that the GES used in planning its reopening and timetable schedules on one side, and perhaps the information about vacancies, about the number of beds and number of desks in classrooms, which the computerized school placement secretariat has and have been using to do the placement. Because it wouldn't have been possible for the GES to have gotten it wrong if they had the right data about vacancies in the schools. Yeah. That is what we see to be the issue of coordination between the Ghana Education Service, the Free Senior High School Secretariat, and then the Computerized School Placement and Selection Secretariat.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to bring in Dr. Clementa Park with the Education Committee in Parliament. Dr. Park, I know your committee has been monitoring this situation over the last 48 hours. What's your intervention on this? I mean, what's your reading of the situation with the way it's been handled? We've just had the analysis there of what the real challenge is. You've also done some of your own analysis on it. Is that what it is? Kindly unmute your Zoom for me.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Very well. I was saying good evening to you and good evening to viewers and co-panelists. I must say that I agree with the assessment and the narration made by my good friend from African Educational Watch. But you see, there is a reason why we have institutions, why people are paid, why they have their jobs, to ensure that citizens get the benefit for the taxes that they pay, and that governments are able to deliver on their promises. So government and the GES and the ministry ought to be blamed by not living up to expectation, because there is no reason why till date there is no synergy between the different entities responsible for ensuring that this program that we believe has come to inure to the benefit of Ghanaians is not giving its best because of poor implementation. And in fact, quite honestly, the erratic and haphazard way in which the academic calendar has been applied since the inception. I mean, it is not rocket science. We all knew the figures, as you know, Mr. Asari indicated. And so, what was it that made it impossible for the GES to have anticipated, for government to have anticipated, that in light of the slow pace at which infrastructure, physical infrastructure, is being established to match the exponential increase in the student population, arrangements ought to have been made so that the proper staggering would have been done ahead of time, not to have brought us to where we are, where students have traveled from across the length and breadth of this country at a time where there is so much hardship. Parents have had to work very hard to mobilize resources to make provision for their students, to pay their transportation, for them to travel from places like my constituency of Fumbisi to Cape Coast, only to arrive and be told to go back because somebody was sleeping on the job.
But we've had the apology from the Ghana Education Service. Is this something that you accept?
I mean, after the fact, I think that the apology is insincere, largely because they had ample time. And given that GES is the principal agency, there was no reason why they could not have anticipated this, to have announced this much more earlier, so that parents, students, would not have gone through the stress that they went through. Students risking their lives to travel as far as they have to school and be told to go back again. And you see, GES and government and the ministry are not being sincere. If you look at the communique that was issued, and I believe it is Madam Cassandra who signed it, the primary reason that was given was not the challenge of a lack of physical space to accommodate the students. They sought to put a lot more weight on the excuse that this was being done to allow the students to stay home for, give or take, another 1 month, so that they could then come to school and have, quote unquote, uninterrupted study time. But that is not the truth. The real reason why we are where we are is because government, as you said earlier, and we have said that too, since 2017, has failed to even construct half of the 1,119 educational infrastructure projects on various campuses of senior high schools at a time when the student population is increasing. So, like it or not, the double track system is still alive and well. The issue of fiscal infrastructure is still a challenge. And the sooner government applies the resources approved by Parliament, and I speak about the $1.5 billion, which was collateralized in the name of GET Fund to assist in the expansion of fiscal infrastructure, is used to ensure that the infrastructure deficit is addressed. That is not happening. And we have said in our statement that at least about 800 million is still housed at the Ministry of Finance, when those monies should have gone to contractors who have done work to certain stages and need their certificates to be financed so that they can finish. Completing only 539 in 4 years plus is not good enough.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Park, keeping them honest, they complete more than 500. You also had 4 years. You had yourself a target of 200, and you couldn't do it.
Evans, we are speaking about today and now. If you wanted me to do the politics, you should have.
No, I mean, see, this is not. I'm saying keeping them honest. Once you say, once you've mentioned that they have done 500, it's just fair to it's just fair because you're also in government.
And I'm speaking about what they have put in their 2021 budget. I have it with me.
Yeah.
I didn't write the budget.
I mean, what you're saying.
168. And you look at paragraph 929.
Well, no, what you're saying is a fact. What you're saying is a fact.
That is a promise they made to the good people.
Yeah, so they made a promise of 1,000.
Simplicity.
They've done 500. Isn't it fair to put in a contest and say, okay, in the last 8 years, we've had 2 governments?
Knowing fully well that it was going to lead to an exponential number of students going to school.
Let me bring in Cassandra Chum. Cassandra, so tell me, you have 1 month now, give or take, before the Form 3s come back to school. The big question is, in that 1 month period, can the GES and the Education Service fix the challenges that Charles has articulated? As in, yes, the buildings that you have to furnish them, give them furniture, so you reduce the congestion before the 5th of May for, Gertrude's child and a million others to go back to school. Can you fix that problem in a month?
Yes, Evan, that problem can be fixed. I must say that it's actually in the pipeline. I mean, we have started something on that. But before I answer your question, let me clarify that the CSSPS, Computerized School Selection and Placement, is part of Ghana Education Service. Kofi Asari said it's a different secretariat, and so we are not really coordinating well and all of that. We are actually working together. CSSPS is part of GES, and Free Education Secretariat, though certain as the Ministry of Education, we are all working together to implement this policy. And the space that we are talking about, obviously, it's not really about infrastructure, because we all acknowledge that indeed we have the infrastructure available, and the other things, I mean, the furniture and all of that is also in the pipeline. But you know that even when we said we're not going to do double track, we came in again when the first days were going that we're actually doing a double track because we, based on the advice of the Ghana Health Service and the second wave of COVID and all of that came in, we had to. So even though we had the facility or the infrastructure and everything, we also needed to be mindful of the fact that we had COVID in the system, and so we still cannot.
But Cassandra, you say
the students being packed in the schools.
Cassandra, you say that you have the infrastructure, but the truth is you don't have adequate infrastructure.
Well, that is undeniable. We are not saying that we have it all, but we have made progress. I mean, you acknowledge that we have over 400 new facilities in the senior high schools and all of that. But that the other things that the CHAS, Conference of Heads of Assessment, are requesting for, actually we have started something on it. And the question that you asked, that within the 1 month period, whether we will be able to do, of course, we will be able to fix all of that. Because even within that period, when they go back, you know, we have students in the school. And so when they go, another session will come out. So definitely all of this will be fixed. And I mean, it's in the pipeline. Let me assure you that it's in the pipeline. Everything will be fixed within that period.
I mean, pardon me if I have a slight doubt there, because I've heard it's in the pipeline before. Everything will be fixed before. The kids only show up and postpone because it hasn't been fixed. I mean, Charles made the point that they told you this way back in March, and still you had a month and you still couldn't fix it. I mean, so pardon me if I disbelieve the assurance.
Evans, just like I said, I just do not want to go into the exact time that Charles presented its concerns and the exact time that she has also communicated, because again and again, we acknowledge that we didn't even send the information out on time. And so there is no justification. No. And that's why I keep
even now we've moved past the communication. We are talking about fixing the fundamental problem that triggered the sudden postponement, right? And it is about, do we have the capacity to fix this in a month? And you say you do.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Because even some of the schools, it's not actually a new set of furniture. They have that, but they may have some parts broken, and then you need the school capital to fix them and then put those pieces together. And some need entire sets, and that is what we are working on. Okay. That wouldn't be a problem at all. When they go back on the 5th or when the time, we will be able to accommodate them on the school campus, and we won't have any issue at all.
I mean, Kofi, tell me, and I'll come to Gertrude shortly, the parent. Can parents like Gertrude and her child and a million others be rest assured that this problem of congestion, as Cassandra has assured, will indeed in the next month be fixed before the 5th of May? Knowing what you know, is that a promise you can bang on?
I think it is practically possible to insist that contractors who have been given contracts to supply furniture do so within the stipulated time. I mean, this is not hard infrastructure, or it's not brick and mortar, which takes time. It is furniture, and so it is very, very possible to insist that contractors who have already been contracted to supply furniture to these schools do so within the next 30 days. It is very possible. But it is very possible on the basis that, one, we are being told the truth, that the reason why the postponement of schools was announced was not because we wanted to give the student the luxury of spending 5 months uninterrupted period in school for them to write the examination. That was not the reason.
That was the reason.
So the reason. No, but that was the reason.
You know, the questions Evans asked was
no. I'm answering a question. I mean, that was what was in the letter you wrote. The reason you gave for the postponement was that it was to afford students an opportunity to spend 5 months on campus.
Yes.
But today, I spoke. I listened to the CHAS president. I'm still in Ashanti reading, and he is also a headmaster in Ashanti reading, and he indicated clearly that the reason was that there was no furniture, and CHAS Ashanti initiated the move. And so what you are telling us is totally different from what the headmasters are saying. Again,
okay, I indicated that.
No. Let me finish.
Okay.
We can only resolve the issue when we are honest about the challenge. Fantastic. The apology can only be taken in good faith with the expectation that we all work together to resolve this issue and prevent it from recurring when we are honest about the challenge. But when we are not honest about the challenge and we are virtually dressing the window, then we are not solving the problem. The second issue is this. I mentioned the issue of the lack of synergy, the seeming lack of synergy between the Computerized School Placement Center and the GES. Why did I say so? Because I mentioned that on the 4th of February, Mr. Sasu made a pronouncement that per their plan, Form 3s and Form 2s will be in school. And Form 1, both tracks, will be at home. When Form 3s and Form 2s leave school, then the Form 1s alone will come to school. That was the statement put out by Mr. Sasu, the CSSPS coordinator. That agency is the one that knows the number of people they are placed in every school, how many are boarders, how many beds are empty, how many beds are occupied. And so if the CSSPS coordinator said this, only for the GES to announce that on 16th or so of March, all Form 1 students and all Form 2 students will still be in school and still expect Form 3 students to join the cohort on the 6th of April, then that was not consistent with what the CSSPS coordinator has said. So on what basis are you telling us that the CSSPS is the same as the GES, you are together? Obviously, you are not using the same data. That's why we are confused. That's the issue. If we don't admit the genuine challenges, there's no way we can resolve this. Because this is not the first time. This is about the 8th time the GES is actually obstructing the academic timetables. Between 2018 and now, this is about the 8th time. So this is not the first time. In 2019, October, you postponed reopening. A day before reopening, you postponed it by 1 month. When it was just about 14th November on the postponed date, then you postponed it again for another 6 days. This is not the first time. And we have complained overly. And so just apologizing and not telling us the real reason for all of us to come and sit around the table, and find a solution does not make the apology an honest one and does not give any stakeholder the assurance that we won't be discussing this issue again. That is our problem.
Okay. Cassandra, please respond to that briefly and let me take a break.
Okay, again, CSSPS is part of Ghana Education Service. It is one of our units. It's not a different agency. And so please take that. And I'm not privy to what Mark said, and so I cannot really speak to it. But let me say that in the press release, I indicated that the postponement was to give them an uninterrupted instructional hours. And that is exactly what the situation is. Again, Charles indicated to us the other challenges, which yes, we are working on that particular challenge, the furniture and all of that. And we are hopeful, and that, let me not say even hopeful, we are very sure that on the 5th of May, all those challenges or all those concerns that Charles raised, of which we spoke about, will be resolved. Yeah, but again, we also have the academics of the students also at heart, and that is the reason why. Whatever decision that we are taking, we are mindful of their final exams, and we are mindful of the need to prepare them adequately for the exams.
I mean, Dr. Park, Gertrude, stand by. I'll get you to chip in on this. I'll take a quick break. When I return, I'll hear Dr. Park, I'll hear Gertrude, also the parent, on how she's faring with her child in the midst of what we're hearing about congestion. I want to hear a parent's account, an assessment of the free SHS. And Dr. Park, of course, will weigh in on solving this problem in a month. Stay with me. You're so live here on PM Express, a conversation about parents, about teachers, about children, and of course the stakeholders themselves and the GES and Education Ministry on the back of the sudden postponement of the academic calendar for the Form 3s who are in senior high school. With me is Cassandra Chuma. She speaks for the Ghana Education Service. Also with me is Gertrude Razak, who is a parent. Dr. Clement Park, who is a Deputy Ranking on Education Committee, and of course, Kofi Asare, Executive Director of the Africa Education Watch. Dr. Clement Park, just before the break, we're talking about how to fix this problem. I mean, I know there is a long-term possible solution, but in the very short term, the next 4 weeks, the children will still have to return to school. I mean, Cassandra has given the assurance that the challenge of congestion will be fixed in a month. Kofi Asare believes it's possible because if you have to put the chairs in there, just get contractors to do it. What's your assessment? Can this be done, and how do you do it? Sorry, please unmute for me.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Well, to your question, we can only wish for the best because it's the ministry, it's the GES, they are in charge. And equally, the resources can be mobilized for the contractors to do the needful. Then, as Kofi said, it is entirely possible. But the history of the interruptions in terms of changing dates and postponing reopening dates indicate that we have every reason to take this assurance with a pinch of salt. But given the time frame that we are looking at, and the fact that these students have to come to school and prepare adequately, and I must emphasize, not because GES and the ministry wants them to have uninterrupted instructional time, but simply because there is no space for them to be accommodated. And we can only hope that the right things are done so that in 1 month, they can be in school to study and give off their best.
Gertrude, so you sent your ward to school. Your ward is a beneficiary of the free SHS. We've heard about the congestion in the school. Give me your experience of the free SHS and as it relates to the space in your child's school and the concerns that you've heard about congestion. What's a parent's experience? What does your child tell you about his or her experience in school under free SHS?
Okay, so I actually have 2 children.
Okay.
One in a secondary school in Accra and one in Cape Coast.
Okay.
And it seems they tell me the same thing. So for the one in Accra, food is a problem. If you don't go to the dining hall in time, you won't get food to eat. He told me in his school, there are Form 1 sleeping on the floor. You know? So he has some mates sleeping on the floor. Some are sleeping on bunk beds. Mm-hmm. And then there's a general issue of even when to bath, because the time stipulated to bath is not enough to accommodate all students who want to bath. In his house, he told me, Mommy, we have 300 new Form 1s in our house. You know? So generally when we talk, you realize that there's a problem with food, there's a problem with space, and there's even a problem, I think, with teachers. Because what I've been thinking about is, so teachers that are teaching, I think, from beginning of the year till now, are they going to be changed when the Form 3 goes? If they are not, then it means they'll be stressed by the time the Form 3 goes. You know? And then with food, I can understand. Even when we're paying school fees, it wasn't easy. So you can imagine when it's being done for free. Quality of food is a problem. Even the quantity is also a problem. So those are some of the challenges I am faced with. So it means you have to give more food. For me, my daughter last time took 5 tins of Milo because she said, Mommy, if you don't give me Milo to drink, the food I get is not enough. There are times it's not even good, so I don't eat. and the government can do so much. So what can I do as a parent? If I have to give more food so my daughter will be okay, I have to give it.
Your child in boarding house and center, has he got a place to sleep when he goes, or is one of those who has had to deal with sleeping on the floor, on the mat?
So we did not. This will be the first time she'll be going to school after the Form 1s went to school.
Okay.
So we didn't even get to go to the house to know what is going on.
Okay.
So I cannot tell whether she would get space or she wouldn't get space.
Okay.
But feedback she had from the Form 2s in school was that the space there will not be adequate.
Okay.
For all of them, they have to come.
Okay. Okay. So let's return to. So that's a parent's assessment of free SHS. There are challenges, obviously, that has to be dealt with. And so, Cassandra, what do you say to the parents as you've heard it? This is raw, unfiltered feedback for you in dealing with the problem.
Yes, and we appreciate the feedback. I think maybe after the interview, I would have to get the school because it's not a general issue. We also have schools that will tell you that their food is of good quality in terms of quantity, everything is fine. And so, of course, in as much as we have different caterers and different people handling this, I'm not doubting her. There may be one or two challenges. And so we acknowledge the feedback. I have not heard about students sleeping on the floor. And so it's also a good thing for me to also inform management and then we get to know the schools that have that problem. And so we thank her for bringing this issue up and they will definitely follow up on that.
I mean, Gertrude, tell me from a parent's point of view, your child will definitely return on the 5th of May. What do you hope to see or hear from your child on the 5th of May when he returns to school? We've heard Cassandra say, we have 4 weeks, we'll fix the challenge with the chairs and the congestion. As a parent, what do you say? What do you want to see in a month when your child returns?
So I want my daughter to go to school to have a bed. I want her to go to school to have teachers who are well conditioned to teach and ready to offer their services. I want her to go to school with everything she would need to have a comfortable stay in school provided. And for me, the duration is even a challenge. But from where we are sitting, we cannot do anything about it. Because having your daughter go to school for almost 6 months without a break is quite a challenge. But that is what we are faced now. So we only have to pray and hope that they can learn and write their exams and pass very well.
Okay. Let me come to Kofi, because Kofi, I wanted to look at the big picture now in terms of, clearly we have challenges with free SHS, but everybody agrees now that it is the only way to go. There's no rolling back. And so in a few minutes as we wrap up, how do we solve these problems in a more permanent manner? Because it appears to me we've had ad hoc approaches to dealing with it. So there's a double track, that which was supposed to be, interim, and then we rolled it back, we reintroduced it. We are having to, suddenly postpone reopening date. Clearly, the challenges still persist, right? What is the sustainable long-term solution to this? Because free SHS has come to stay. Briefly.
Well, let me say that before free senior high school, there was a lot of congestion in some schools, especially the grade A or the so-called grade A schools. And so the issue of congestion is not an issue synonymous with or peculiar to free senior high school, for which Cassandra should worry about. But we want to discuss the issue because we want to find a holistic or a long-lasting solution to it. But in the case of congestion, as I'm saying, if you really want, I know Cassandra is aware that there's congestion, but she says you will find out from the parent after the discussion. If you want to find out about congestion, just go to a Brick Girls right now. Go there around 8 o'clock. You'll see people sleeping on the floor. You don't have to go far. And so it's an issue that has been there before free senior high school. I think that the long-term solution to congestion in the grade A and grade B schools is that government needs to continue what it has started doing by embarking on an equitable development of facilities and human capital in all senior high schools. Upgrading the capacity of grade C, if you like, grade C schools to the level of grade A and grade B schools, so that infrastructure-wise and facility-wise, it wouldn't make a difference if you attended Presec or if you attended Chufukpa Secondary School. The second thing government has to continue doing, government has to start doing, in addition to leveraging on infrastructure development in the least equipped schools and the least endowed schools, is to begin rolling out a program to deploy specialist subject teachers to this grade C and grade D and grade B schools. The difference between Presec and TRIPAS is that if you go to Presec, the teacher teaching maths is a mathematics specialist. But if you go to TRIPAS, a teacher is teaching maths and then he teaches economics. You did economics and he's teaching maths. So we don't have subject specialists teaching subjects in this grade C or grade D schools, I may call. And so the expansion of infrastructure, provision of facilities, laboratory facilities, etc., and the deployment of subject specialists as teachers are three things that can happen to upgrade the quality of Benkum Secondary School and TRIPAS to the level of Presec. It is possible. We've seen it being done in Methodist Girls High in Manfi. And so if government continues with the infrastructure expansion ongoing in all the schools and complements it with the deployment of subject specialists so that a teacher will not be asked to go and teach economics and teach social and teach geography at the same time. No. Specialize in one subject, have the expertise there, and impart the knowledge with your specialist knowledge, with your specialist expertise. We will be having Presecs and Ogascos and Achimotes in the grade C schools. That is all that government should do. It is not rocket science. And I think that what government is doing is great. They should continue doing that and then add the subject specialist to the equation. And I'm sure we should be having a different story in 2 or 3 years to come if we're able to do this. Yeah. Once we ease the pressure on the grade A schools, the problem of free senior high school congestion is 99% solved. Once we ease the pressure on the 50 or so grade A schools, and we spread it evenly to the grade B and grade C schools, there are about 700 schools. Everybody wants to go to 50 schools. Let's spread the facilities upgrade. Let's spread the teacher deployment in the area of specialist teachers. And let's spread also the infrastructure. Once we do this, I'm sure that we should be able to see reasonable demand for grade B and grade C schools with the assurance that the teachers there, with the facilities there, will produce better learning outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Park, very briefly.
Evans, please.
Yes.
Can I respectfully clarify this? Kofi, why are you laughing, Kofi? Kofi, again, let me give you this information that we have subject specialists in all our schools. Have you forgotten that the teachers at Presec are the teachers that we posted? We had that issue some years ago, but that has been resolved. Listen, that is the reason why, Kofi, listen, that is the reason why these days we even do the postings right at the headquarters. We recruit based on this subject specialties, and then we post them to specific schools with specific needs. And so we in the Benkum